It all started 2 months ago, the village of Ibergina on the edge of the Western lands. The whole horror happened in the year of the girl's 18th birthday. Then she did not even guess, and did not know what fate had prepared for her. At one point, Erin looks away and sees a stranger in front of her, who is noticeably different from the local girls. She has bright red hair, blue eyes, and overall, an unusual appearance. The girl came with a confident gait, as if she knew what she wanted. She started to approach where the most people were. She clearly wanted everyone to hear and see what was about to happen. The locals started whispering amongst themselves, but no one recognized her, all very curious about who she was and what she had come for. Some were afraid to even look at her, and some were trying to get closer, to ask a few questions about who she was, where she came from, how long she would be staying in the village, and how they could help her. But this mysterious person keeps the intrigue and does not say a single word. She smiles silently, and it seems that this meeting people will remember for a long time. As suddenly, the girl decided to see if the descendants of the family that had served the king lived here. But judging by her look, people had better think carefully before answering that question. Without hesitation, Erin replies that the girl was not wrong. In the past, they had all sworn to the king as if to a deity, but to date, few people give importance to this event. The girl looked at her and realized she had come to the right place. No one even realizes that it was better to keep silent and not admit that they were somehow connected to the king. Erin decided to add that back in their grandmother's generation, the spirits and gods had left these lands. In their entire lives, no villagers have ever heard the voice of a deity. They only live in the area and have little to do with the customs that were here before. The girl listened carefully to all this information. I really wonder how she will react to it and what she came here for in the first place. At one point, she starts singing the words of a song, namely, "This story left behind by a vanished god." This story is about spirits and people who have lost their god, but it is not clear why she does it. The girl realized that everyone knows these words. Some even began to sing along. The lyrics of the song have been passed down from generation to generation. Even little children know the words. They are taught them from the first day of school and at home. The local girls wanted to uphold the tradition and decided to sing a song, not surprising if this is part of the guests' plan. Eventually, the girls held hands and started walking in a circle and singing lyrics about a heartless creature that possessed eternal life. And then, there was something about saving the world. That's supposed to come in winter, that freezes everything in its path. Meanwhile, while no one can see, the girl started to smile even more, as if she was up to something. She turned to the people and said how good it was that they knew this song, although in fact, just now, they had made a very big mistake. At some point, some people felt something strange. There was an unpleasant energy, and a feeling that everyone was about to be trapped. Just a second later, a lot of ironclad guards appear out of nowhere, and from the look of them, it all made sense. They didn't come to have tea and talk about how beautiful the weather was today. Without explanation, one of them got down to business and hit the nearest girl very hard. The others were very frightened, for they did not understand why they were being punished in such a way. These ruthless beings, who cannot be called human, have come to destroy everyone in their path, doing the bidding of their mistress. As soon as the guards started beating people, their mistress got even more excited. She turned to the girls and asked them to sing the whole song to her again, though she understands that people don't care about it now at all. The villainess warned them not to resist or try to escape, for if anyone dared to do so, they'll all meet their doom here, and it'll be sooner than it could be. She really doesn't seem to be kidding. At some point, she stopped being quiet and started doing everything to make the locals afraid of her. At the same time, no one understands why they deserve such a thing, because for many years, it was one of the peaceful villages where no one did anything bad, especially on purpose. As suddenly, the villainess said something interesting and very important. According to her, in every generation of families that serve the King of Winter, there is one who can communicate with spirits. It turns out she intends to find this man, for she is sure he is among some of them. For now, her attention is most focused on Erin. The girl replied that this was a common legend, and most likely among humans, there did not seem to be any who could communicate with spirits. The second the villainess let go of the girl, and decided to remind each of them of the desperate situation they were now in. The villainess said they clearly don't realize it and don't understand what she can do to them if someone refuses to cooperate or purposely hides the truth. When suddenly, the villainous Elizabeth ordered her assistants to send every last one of them to a dark and locked room. At that moment, people realized that from this day on, their lives would depend on the mood of this girl who was determined to find the right person, even if it meant destroying the whole village. They realized that they were too naive when they began to admire the appearance of the devil himself in the village, because there is no other way they can call Elizabeth. Irene, an orphan, and since her childhood the people of this village have cared for her as their own daughter. But she took their lives. It happened at a very unexpected moment, and unfortunately, it couldn't have gone any other way. In the end, the villain destroyed almost everyone and everything. She burned down houses, she didn't spare children and the elderly. A year later, during that time, Erin still wonders how she was kept alive, as she thought no one could survive such a thing. The girl noticed that unlike the other people she knew, she was treated in a special way by the villain and her assistants. At a time when no one else was spared, she was left to watch from the sidelines and punished far less and less harshly. Because of this, the girl looked at others and even began to blame herself. She was very ashamed to watch someone suffer, and for some reason, it was as if she was being taken care of. It was impossible to describe in words how she felt as her acquaintances died one by one. Erin had seen so much that nothing would surprise her anymore. On the one hand, she was really lucky, but on the other hand, it is possible that she will suffer an even crueler fate than all the dead. It remains to be seen why only she was left behind. After they had gotten rid of every villager except her, the assistant who had been ordered to find out information did so in the most brutal ways. But in return, the girl never told him anything on purpose. She tolerated, and at the same time, still realized that he couldn't hurt her as much as the others, because they needed her alive. Every day the girl began to hate that face more and more. It seemed to her somehow crazy, especially his eyes and his smile. The only time she could get alone and relax was a few hours at night. But even at those times, it was too hard to sleep. Erin couldn't afford to rest after all she had seen. She would never forgive herself that because of her, the whole village had died. Which means she's really hiding something, and the villain wasn't wrong to feel a special energy around Erin. It turns out that even her closest friends didn't know about the girl's secret. It was as if she knew that such a moment would come, and she purposely didn't tell anyone anything, because someone could give up and tell to stay alive. Though in truth, no one gave guarantees that if anyone told anything would be released. Perhaps the girl did the right thing. For in any case, no matter how it sounded, the village was doomed to perish. And it was only because Erin didn't confess that she wasn't treated as harshly as she could have been. She's very glad she didn't make a mistake and did what her intuition told her to do. Meanwhile, the villainess came to her assistant and started asking if he had managed to find out anything. The latter replied that no matter how hard he tried, the girl just kept quiet. The villain is sick of waiting and seems to have started planning something new. She has a smile on her face, which means it's not indicative of anything good. She even started laughing, and at that moment, the girl was really scared because the last time it happened, it didn't end well. When suddenly, Elizabeth suddenly confessed the only thing she was interested in, and after which she would supposedly let the girl go. The last words of a song that no one had been able to finish, because not everyone knows all the words. Does the villain want to find some kind of decoding? Otherwise, it's not clear why she needs to know the end of the song so badly. It turns out that everything is very simple. Somehow it will help her to become an empress. She just needs to learn a few words from the song, and it can be considered that the place of empress is secured. But it is not clear how it is connected. To date, she knows only one way to do it, but she's sure there's another way to get her way. Erin doesn't understand how such a person, who for the sake of her goal, can destroy anyone, can even want to gain power. She is a very cruel person, who finds it difficult and very unwilling to act in the place of the Empress, because then she'll have even more power, and probably more innocent people will die. Therefore, in order to delay this moment as far as possible, the girl is ready to keep silent and suffer, just so that it would never happen, because such a person as the villain does not deserve to become an empress. At some point, the girl stopped paying attention to them, lowered her head, looked down at the floor, and thought about her thoughts. Elizabeth noticed it at once. She began to resent the girl for not being afraid of her and not realizing what she could do to her. The villain just really likes to see fear in people's eyes. She likes to be scared and cry, so she didn't like it right away when the girl stopped doing that. She immediately wanted to hit her, but when she realized that after that the girl would not help her, she changed her mind and became even more angry. The villainess had had enough and decided that no one dared to stop being afraid of her. She turned to her assistant and allowed him to do whatever he wanted as long as Aaron said the last words of the song. The man was very much pleased and said that since that was so, in a few hours, the lady would know what she wanted to. He thanked her for the leeway and promised that he would handle it very quickly. His smile was starting to make the girl very wary. She even regretted pissing off the villainess. Elizabeth warned that the girl now had two options: calmly tell her what was required of her, or be in the same room with this madman for a few days. She warned that even if the girl told everything after she stayed with him in this room, she would still be doomed to suffer for the rest of her life. So, the villainess advised to tell everything right now. Aaron was so badly confused that she couldn't answer anything. On the one hand, she was really scared, but on the other hand, since she had put up with so much, it wouldn't be right to tell everything so quickly. Meanwhile, it's been a whole year since then, and by some miracle, she's managed to make it to this point. All that's left of her is a shell of a person. Inside, Eileen feels nothing. She feels empty, and is sure she has no more than a few months to live. At one point, she heard voices and the joy of people, all of them out in the street celebrating the return of Princess Elizabeth. Aaron heard those voices and remembered those wonderful times when she too could go out freely and owed no one anything. Except that a few minutes later, the girl heard the villainess being called Empress. Did she really manage to become one after all? And did it in a different way? Since the girl is often unconscious, she has no control over how long it can last, so she doesn't always have time to keep up with the latest news. For example, now she's been unconscious for so long that in that time, the villain has managed to become Empress even without her help. Though maybe she just imagined it. Maybe the people weren't referring to the Empress but to Emperor Alex. Although it is possible that they got married and accordingly Elizabeth became Empress, this is proven by the fact that she smiles and is even happy to see people. The moment someone's dreams come true, an innocent girl lies in a dark room with no food or water. No one came into her room for a few days. The aides were used to her passing out often and decided there was no point in coming in every day. Aaron started to pray, but for a moment she thought that if the Lord allowed such injustice, he probably never existed in the first place. The girl closed her eyes and resigned herself to waiting for her doom. But at the same second, she didn't notice that someone had appeared in the room. It's some translucent man with a blue glow coming out of nowhere. His appearance was so silent that the girl didn't even notice it. It would be interesting to see her reaction when she saw this man in front of her. Though in fact, this creature only partially resembles a normal human being. It has very long blue-colored hair, long ears, and also, some faint coldness emanates from it, like the energy of a winter person. Without hesitation, he walked over to the girl and touched her head, but she didn't even feel it. Aaron continued to cry and hoped that the next life would be better. In fact, this god does not always appear, but just because the girl prayed constantly and very often and said his name, he thought she really needed help. Afterward, he began to look at her and imagined how she had been tortured here, and how cruel were the people who had locked her up in this room. In that case, he decided he couldn't let it go. He had to help, and luckily he knew how to do it. If he could be called a god, he used his divine power and tried everything he could just to give her some strength. When suddenly he thought it wasn't enough. The girl had been through so much, he thought she deserved something more. He created some kind of cold power, and thanks to it, he wants to give Aaron a small gift. Now she doesn't even think that she didn't pray so much and hope for salvation for nothing. It turns out that God decided to give her a second life. He made sure that this time she did not have to suffer, and the girl lived it happily, as she dreamed. It's actually the first time he's doing it, but it seems like the odds of him failing or making it worse are very small. God looked up at the starry night sky, for he knows that at this time, whatever he wishes will come true. He started to say special words, without which desire alone is not enough. He is very interested to see the reaction of the girl who has lost the meaning in life and is sure that everything is lost. Except at one point, he uttered an interesting phrase, as if they were bound by nothing beyond human comprehension. Just as he began to utter these words, something appeared in the sky that seemed to create the life he was talking about. Moments later, the girl wakes up in some new place, in a bright room, and feels what is clearly a second life. She got a little teary-eyed because she wanted to see who did it. She doesn't even know how to react to it or what to do. The girl can't believe that now she won't have to ask permission to eat or go out for a walk, when suddenly she got a headache. But it must have been because of the change of scene, for she had come into this world without any health problems or any other. After that, she looked out the window and saw a lot of sunlight. It was so unusual for her that it became difficult to hold back the tears. It's not a big deal to normal people, but to her, it's like a luxury she couldn't even dream of. As if in an instant, the girl lost her memory and perceived the past life as a dream. In this life, she had recently read a novel, and it began to dream every night. She really doesn't remember that just a few minutes ago, the plot of the novel. This was her life. Now she thinks this is her first life and no past life ever happened. I can't believe it. But I took this dream seriously as something horrible that couldn't possibly happen in real life, even though I had just been in Aaron's shoes. The girl began to hate the villain and pity the one in whose place she was. Very interesting what will happen next, because so far, it is impossible to predict what will happen in a few minutes. After the dream, she had this overwhelming urge to hit Elizabeth and protect Aaron, and harder. After that, she doesn't want to keep the book in her room, so she decides she needs to get rid of it, or hide it somewhere else. She regretted reading the novel, for there was a feeling that it carried some sort of curse behind it. Though perhaps it was that sense of a past life that she was confusing with a curse. Meanwhile, the girl came in to brush her teeth, and still, I think to myself, if you think about it, she remembers that last moment of Aaron's life suspiciously too well. And it bothers her a lot. It's like she wasn't just having a dream, she was experiencing the same emotions with her, like she was in her shoes. She even has a feeling that something else happened after the girl died. But for some reason, the god and what he did, she doesn't remember at all. For a moment, she thought it didn't make sense, as long as she didn't have that horrible dream again. Meanwhile, Alice, that's her name in this life, came to work. She met the CEO and wished him a good day. The man noticed that the girl was very lightly dressed and began to worry that she would become cold during the day, because today they promise a heavy downpour. Alice replied that she was dressed that way on purpose, because on the contrary, she really likes the cool temperature, even indoors. After that, other employees joined in, and they were also very surprised and said that she was very lucky because everyone else was uncomfortable in a cold office. At some point, another girl sees them, but for some reason, she's been in a bad mood all morning, clearly not happy about something. The girl seemed to see her enemies, and looked as if she were not at all glad to see them. As soon as the first break came, a disgruntled employee called Alice in for another conversation. She suggested that we go outside and work something out. The girl asked why she was always calling her to talk, and why it couldn't be done in the office. As soon as Alice started talking to her, the girl heard her voice and started to get even angrier at her. Alice thought that most likely the girl saw her as a competitor, and wanted to make her want to quit and find another job. So that there would be no more such conversations, she explained that unlike her, Alice had no other options and no rich relatives who could give her money. So she asked that Day try to get rid of someone else. Suddenly the girl couldn't stand it and pushed Alice right after those words. Could she really afford to do that while she was at work? It's strange that Alice doesn't react to it or try to do something in response, though maybe she just didn't have time to react. After a second, she comes up and asks what the girl allows herself, because at the very least, the girl can complain to her superiors or tell other colleagues about it. The girl became even more indignant and said that in any case, she would try to make sure that Alice would not be here anytime soon. Very strange and incomprehensible why she even wants to get rid of fellow girls so badly. Even Alice herself never realized it. Although in fact, she has long had an assumption that the girl is in love with the CEO and wants to make him stop talking to girls, even on work-related topics. She probably does dream of getting rid of most of her competitors, except whether or not she'll succeed. There's a lot of doubt about it. The girl was very angry, because she probably heard the truth and wanted revenge, because she didn't want anyone else to know about it. Alice reacted in time, grabbed her arm and told her that if she tried to hit or hurt her again, she would definitely tell the whole staff about it. She was tired of feeling weak and giving in just because she was too lazy to have a conflict. She decided it was time to stand up for herself, and she shouldn't have to suffer because someone fell in love with someone else. She hinted that next time, the cause of this conflict would either be found out by the CEO himself or gradually by his colleagues. Alice promised that if she didn't bother her again and call her out on this kind of talk, no one would ever find out about anything. So it was up to her to choose. Instead of agreeing or finding a compromise, the girl continued to resent and promised that sooner or later she would get her way and Elisa would lose her job. After that, this self-confident girl decided to finally spoil Alice's mood and to raise her self-esteem. She reminded that in this world it is status that decides, and unlike Alice, she will be able to achieve her own and be happy. And a loser like her, in her opinion, could never achieve anything. Even if she tried really hard, it would all be pointless. She began to speak for the importance of good looks, and thus upset Alice even more. Though in fact, if the girl had as much money, she would look much better than this strange personage. Surprisingly, but even in such a situation, the girl was not confused. She smiled slightly, and it seems she also decided to spoil the mood of her colleague. Girl told me that if it were her, she wouldn't be smiling so much if she knew one very interesting piece of information that she had missed yesterday. And since Alice never misses a meeting, she will be promoted to deputy manager. So she is already a level higher than that disgruntled girl who just thought she was the best. Alice smiled and asked who would stay on the same level now and who would have a happy future ahead of them. It turns out that the only person in this office who doesn't know how the world works isn't Alice, but someone who's looking at her with envious eyes right now. In order not to look upset, the girl purposely started smiling and said that she would still show who would get the position. Did she say she's up to something and wants to take away Alice's new job, who honestly deserves it? She really never seems to settle down. Alice wasn't afraid, and said that if a girl wants to get rid of the competition so badly, it means she has a bad self-esteem and isn't as confident as she tries to appear to be. At one point, the girl ordered that Alice apologize for her words, or else she would regret it very much. Alice asked what that meant, and in response the girl smiled and said she didn't say it twice. She started counting to 3, and at that moment, Alice was finally confused. She really didn't understand what was going on. It turns out the girl had purposely walked with her to the edge of the building to do something terrible. She pushed Alice and said that this was her fate. She purposely started smiling and said that sooner or later she had to do it. It was a terrible thing to do. How dare she take over another person's life just to get rid of a competitor? The girl said that if Alice had been obedient, perhaps she could have lived longer. But today, she didn't have the patience and let herself do it. In her second, Alice saw in her the very villainess she had seen in her dream. They were really not much different, for they would do anything to get what they desired. Was the second life so short that the girl didn't even get to live a day? It's very unfair, because they're always trying to get rid of her. Only this time it happened a lot faster than you'd expect. I wonder what will happen next. It can't be that once again, history will repeat itself and God will help her again. Surprisingly, but even at this moment, Alice did not feel any fear. She had absolute calmness inside her, as if she felt that everything was fine. A moment later, she sees some phenomenon in the universe that looks like a flash and wakes up in her room again. Alice opens her eyes, feels light cold bodies, and for some reason, she unconsciously begins to cry. The girl realized that this was another dream, though this time, it was all too realistic, even more so than before. Only when she looks at her usual window, Alice realizes that this is not her room at all. She doesn't understand where she is and what this place is. Everything is different. The room has very old furniture. It's like she's in another world. There's a kitchen and a room in one room, and some firewood in the middle of the room. It's a bit unusual. The girl began to look around, and with each passing minute, she was getting more and more nervous and afraid to see a stranger. She saw some notes on the wall. drawings that looked like portraits, but it still didn't give any insight into what it all meant or how she got here. Alice comes closer and by some miracle, remembers that she remembers these drawings. She immediately feels better and calmer. These are cards from the children of the village for her 18th birthday. Appropriately, she is now 18 years old. It's that time in her life when the villain Elizabeth showed up and her life started to go to hell. Surprisingly, she is now caught in a reality in which she remembers her past perfectly. For her, it is not a dream, but a period that she has been trying hard to forget and not remember for several years. It is impossible to describe in words how much she dreaded to feel all that had been in the past. A choice appeared before her, to leave this world now or later, but in torment in a dark and cold room, just as it was then. It is very difficult and painful for her to remember those times, because nothing worse than what she was able to experience just does not happen. The girl will not wish such a horror even to the enemy. Very interesting what she will do, because at the very least, you can try to make it a point to change the plot, and some of the moments. So she's back to being Erin, and now that she knows her future, she has to either change it or live it again. At some point, she suddenly remembered the villagers. She wondered what was the matter with them now. So she went straight to the street. The girl was terrified of what she might see now, but she ran to open the door anyway. Erin had expected to see something horrible, but in fact it's actually quite peaceful outside. No chaos, and the villain she was most afraid of seeing is gone. She is very unaccustomed to seeing living acquaintances who eat bread quietly and don't guess at anything. Because the last time she saw them, she doesn't even want to remember. It was just awful. At some point, the girl heard someone's voice and felt someone coming closer and closer. It was actually a friend they used to see and hang out with every day. She recognized her voice, and she couldn't help crying as she thought of what the future held for her. Now, it's very hard to look her in the eye. She feels guilty because she's hiding what's next for them. But at the same time, she realizes that if people find out, it'll be even worse. The girl looks at her friend, and instead of seeing her as a normal person, she sees a picture that she can't forget from that day. Erin started crying because of her friend was very scared of her. She doesn't understand what happened. Just now, everything was fine. She just came up to say hello and ended up scaring her friend. The most frustrating thing is that the girl doesn't even know how to explain it or what to say so she won't be considered weird. It turns out today is a special day. It's her birthday. Erin realized why everyone was looking at her like something was wrong. All of them are here to celebrate this day, because 18 years is a very important day in everyone's life, except that something terrible is about to happen. Erin can hardly look at these happy people, for she realizes that this is the last time they will smile. As soon as they started congratulating her and saying nice words, Eileen could barely hold back her tears and tried to pretend they were tears of joy. Of course, she'd like to be happy and have fun on such a beautiful day, but unfortunately she can't. Erin ran up and started hugging her friend, for she missed her a lot and couldn't resist standing still. The girl thought that her friend had probably had a bad dream. She felt sorry for her and asked if everything was all right. Erin looked at her and told her not to worry. Her friend helped her wipe away her tears and suggested that she not get upset on such a beautiful day. At this point, the girl raised. She is not ready to lose all these people again, so no matter how difficult and impossible it turns out to be, she wants to save the village. She wants no residents to be hurt and continue to live happily in life. The girl vowed that this time, things will be very different. Not to delay, the girl approached her friend and quietly asked for one favor. She didn't say what it was for, just asked her to do it, for her sake. She wondered what it was for, but from the look in Erin's eyes, she realized it was better not to ask any more questions right now. She promised that she would do everything. In that case, Erin asked to gather all the residents in the main square and as soon as possible. She's anxious to announce something before the unexpected guest arrives. The weather outside has immediately turned bad. Clouds have appeared, as if warning that something bad is waiting for the village. Meanwhile, the villain is already in the village. She tries to hide under her cloak, but her red hair is hard to miss. She is immediately seen by the locals, with her as then her assistant, who follows her mistress quietly, wondering very much what will happen this time. The girl has only minutes left. Hopefully she has time to do what she wants to do. Otherwise, it's going to be very bad. As soon as the villain began to approach the main square, she was noticed by almost everyone around her. Elizabeth saw that look and tried even harder to hide her face, though it was pointless anymore. Everyone here knows each other very well, and it's easy to tell the non-locals apart. At some point, as soon as the villainess looked in the direction of the elderly people, stopped and started to pause, Erin immediately approached her. Elizabeth was surprised, for she did not think anyone would ever risk coming up to her and asking her anything. The girl doesn't look scared, like she has some plan and managed to do everything she wanted to do. She greeted the villainess and asked if she was a traveler. It's to draw attention to yourself and prevent the villain from talking to someone else. Elizabeth replied that it could be said so, and then asked if the descendants who had served the King of Winter lived in this village. At the same second, the girl pretended not to understand what was being said and asked who the King of Winter was and whether he existed in this world. The villainess began to tell me that he was also called the King of the Winter Spirits, and from that point on, everyone got to the plan. It turns out Erin had managed to hold a meeting and warned them what they needed to answer when talking to the villainess. The girl asked her aunt if she had heard anything about the Winter King. In reply, the woman said in a confident voice that this was the first time she had heard of it. She had not heard such a strange title, and assumed that Elizabeth had the wrong village. And that's what everyone would say. We can only hope the villainess doesn't suspect anything and leaves this village in silence. And to make sure she didn't doubt or check, Erin suggested asking someone older, since people her age were supposedly unlikely to know the King of Winter. She offered to call the village headman and ask him about the king personally, if the villain had the time and desire to do so. At this point, the girl began to dream of one thing, only if the villain refused and just left. Unfortunately, it wasn't that easy. Elizabeth wouldn't stay. She had one last plan. She walked closer to the residence, shared the books where that particular song was recorded, and began quoting lines, hoping someone would remember the words and start singing along with her. The residents looked at this mountain of books and began trying their best to hold back from singing their favorite song. The villain started to help them remember the words, but everyone holds on and gives up. They decided that even though no one understands anything, but as a birthday present, people will try to do what the birthday girl asked them to do. A few minutes ago, in a meeting, she had asked all these people to ignore the villain and in no way, shape or form, tell a single word or line of their favorite song. It's getting incredibly difficult, but people are getting pretty good at it, and Erin's glad, because she thought it was impossible. And to make sure no one gave up, she started looking into everyone's eyes one by one, and made it clear that this was very important. Unfortunately, the girl didn't have time to explain that their lives depend on it. But so far, everything is going according to plan. Even the children ignore the villain and don't say a single word. Elizabeth began to manipulate and said that if the boy knew any information, she would reward him and his whole village. The child was not confused and did everything as the girl asked him because he trusts her much more than this stranger. Elizabeth doesn't know how or what to do anymore. She starts to get nervous and hope that her deputies have found something. We can only hope that the girl was well prepared and hid all the evidence, although the time was very short, and it is unlikely that anyone had time to do so. At that moment, one of them came up to her and informed her that they had already searched everything, and that there were no records or artifacts related to the King of Winter here. One of the elderly locals asked how long ago this King in Winter existed and suggested that if it was more than 100 years ago, it is not surprising that knowledge and information about him has long been lost. The villainess looked at the locals with a puzzled look, and judging by her gaze, she no longer had any desire to search and find out anything. Erin stands in the center, praying as hard as she can that she will leave soon and never come to this village again. She realizes that if things don't go according to plan, all efforts will be in vain. She doesn't want to even think about the fact that many people could die today. As suddenly, the villainess started smiling again and said that they were all acting too suspicious, though maybe she said it on purpose to see the reaction and see if it was true or not. She looked into the girl's eyes as if she wanted to see through her and read her thoughts. Erin was very scared and thought it was all in vain. She forgot for a second that she had to make a confident appearance and in no way react to those words. You have to rely on other people because how they react to it will determine everything. Fortunately, unlike the girl, the rest of these two villages continue to behave confidently and do not fall for manipulation. According to the villainess, it is rare to find a traveler in this region, so she immediately noticed that as soon as she entered the village, no one would pay any attention to her. She is sure that no one will answer this question for sure, and that she is very good at making them nervous. But whether this is actually the case will be clear after the first answer. And that wasn't all. She went on to say that maybe she really could have been overlooked, but the appearance of the soldiers should have alerted or frightened at least some people. It was as if the villagers knew that they would appear and come today. It was very surprising to her that none of the people did not try to come up and stop them to keep the children safe and protected. The villainess is sure they're all hiding something and think they're doing it, when in fact, she can already see the frightened faces. Aaron heard this and realized that all was lost. Now they would either make the villainess even angrier and she would destroy each of them, or by some miracle, they would manage to survive the rest of the day. Suddenly she asked her aides to bring her closer. Could it be that the villainess was referring to Aaron's friend? No one understands what Elizabeth is up to, but from the looks of it, it's no good. The girl started crying and screaming and asked to be let go. Her friend went after her and tried to protect her, but she was immediately pushed away, as was Rosa. Meanwhile, the villainess came even closer and hinted that from now on, she had better not be deceived. She's sure a couple of blows would make some of them confess and tell the truth, if of course people wanted to help and save the girl. She started hitting her so hard that Rose didn't even have the voice to scream as loud as she was hurting so badly. It's unbearable pain, and even now, the villainess keeps smiling and saying that if she cares about her life, it's better to tell the truth and not be tortured. At this moment, Erin came to her friend. She hugged and apologized, because she read that the girl was suffering because of her. Rose could have told the truth a long time ago, but did not do it just for the sake of her friend. Erin doesn't know what to do anymore, because it seems that either way, Elizabeth will destroy each of them, and it will happen either now or a little later. The girl began to hate herself and the villain. And this life she does not understand. Is there really no way to protect the village and punish Elizabeth? Because everything is too unfair and cruel. The villainess looked at her and remembered that when she arrived in the village, she was the only one paying attention to her. The girl did not hold back. She began to cry, but decided that to the last she would not tell the truth, even if it would be very hard and unbearable. She began to beg not to beat her friend, and said it was some misunderstanding, for they had never dared to hide anything. Erin decided to take a chance and explained that the villagers were all just very shy and not used to socializing with strangers and stranger people. After that, the villain smiled and was surprised to be begged for forgiveness. But at this point, everyone was afraid again, because there was no telling what could be expected from her this time. At this point, she started smiling again, and it started to scare the villagers even more. The villain is too unpredictable, and there's no telling what her smile means. Erin started apologizing for her behavior, and said that she didn't mean to make her angry. At one point, the villain was approached by her assistant. He found a sheet of paper and offered to see what it said. I wonder very much if it has anything to do with what she came to this village for perhaps it is her personal letter from a relative or someone she knows. The villainess started saying something about her father having a panic attack or something like that. She started to get nervous and seems to have unforeseen plans. She gave the assistant this long object, turned to the villagers and told them that they were very lucky. She would have to leave. One could only hope she would never come back again. The girl could not believe that a miracle had really happened. The villain had left, and almost no one was hurt, which meant that they had a great opportunity to prepare even better and next time, not to make mistakes. Elizabeth ordered the aides to depart as quickly as possible, which is even better. They ended up leaving the village in a matter of minutes and going about their business. The villain left as quickly as she appeared, but the girl is sure that this is not the last meeting, and the next time will come quickly and unnoticed. Erin looked at the people. They were all in tears, but surprisingly they didn't even blame her for anything. The girl doesn't know what to talk about or where to begin. Instead of continuing to be sad and cry, they went up to her and started calling her their savior, because everything happened exactly as she said it would. which meant that she had managed to warn and tell them a little bit about what was in store for them today. Anyway, even though they had to be a little scared, some got hurt. It all went much better than it could have been. Aaron was very glad they listened to her and took her word for it, for it seemed that those words sounded too strange, as suddenly, one of the men began to tell me that although they were descendants of families who had served the King of Winter, their bond had now faded into oblivion long ago, from generation to generation. A girl was born in this village who could communicate with spirits, my grandmother once told me, that one day there will be one born again who realizes her mission and realizes she's special. The man remembered that when Aaron woke up this morning, her eyes were like those of someone who had traveled a long and tiring journey. All this time, the natives were convinced that the king had left them forever. However, he gave them a present. Here, Aaron. The girl only found out about it now, before she felt that there was something special about her, but she didn't know what it was. She even had thoughts that maybe everyone had it in them. King of Winter. The girl used to think his existence was only a fairy tale, but that wasn't always the case. Now she's convinced he exists. Aaron wishes she could see him, but she doesn't know if it's possible. Very often, before she goes to sleep, she thinks about what could have happened to make him leave the village and never come back and help people again. This mysterious man is often dreamt of by many people, as if he reminds them of themselves about once a month. One day, he was walking through some space and suddenly encountered something that began to unfold, as if born into the world. Eventually, some creature appeared that there was no way he could ignore. The king felt he needed to stop and find out something, but at some point, he suddenly decided it was too early for the creature to emerge and needed to be put back to sleep. As soon as he did so, at some point, the king sees before him something fragile and translucent, within which is a human being. This did not cause him any surprise. The king began to walk through the universe, and after a few days, he learned the terrible news. The god canceled and abandoned Winter. Perhaps that is why, since then, no one has ever seen the Winter King. Meanwhile, the villain has returned to her father's mansion, where, as usual, there's always trouble brewing. She went into his room and saw that he was almost unconscious. It was as if he didn't have long to live, but for some reason, the girl is not upset at all. It's as if she's been waiting for this moment and can't wait for it to happen. She obviously has some plans, and it's obvious that her father is in the way. Even now, she's smiling because she realizes that soon she'll get what she wants. Meanwhile, Aaron went inside, and instead of going to lie down to rest, she started doing something important. While the others have been asleep for a long time, the girl can't calm down and she seems to be up to something. She pulled out some sort of pouch and decided that if she didn't do it now and choose sleep, she would regret it very much, for time was short, and it might be too late later on. It turns out that not only her village, but the whole continent knows the legend. The primordial god originally created the King of Winter and the spirits for the sake of the cycle of life. Winter means the end and the beginning of new life, followed by spring, summer, and fall. Thanks to the 4 seasons, people know the world as it is today. In the distant past, people worshipped the King of Us and considered him the most powerful in the whole world. But after a few years, the people's connection with the spiritual world broke off. Of their union remained only in fairy tale or legends. This legend is kept and honored by this village and many others. Throughout their lives, the locals strive to learn as much information as possible and consider it one of the meanings of their lives. It is very important for them to know the history and everything that is related to it. The girl looked carefully at some map and thought that if the village had some kind of defense or political status that was in the past, no one would attack them, and some people would even be afraid to think about it. At one point, she had an amazing plan to gather all the villagers late at night to do something and go to the water. The girl decided to dive under the water first to make sure it was exactly what she was interested in. She saw a statue there and a lot of other things that would be nice to get and see on land. Quite by chance, she saw on the statue of the King of Winter a piece of jewelry that is very visible even from a distance. At this moment, the girl realized that she had not gone under the water for nothing, for she felt that there might be something interesting here. It turns out it's a spirit stone left behind by villagers a long time ago. The locals thought, why not take the statue out of the water, since the villain had already left, and they could do it safely. As soon as people changed their minds about taking out the statue, as it was much safer and more secure to keep them underwater, Erin emerged from the water. She showed the spirit stone and cheered everyone else up, but no one understands what to do with him and how he can help them. All began to hope only in Erin, because most likely she definitely knows more than anyone else. Suddenly, the people felt some movement under their feet. They don't understand what's going on, because it happened right after Erin got up with the spirit stone. A massive earthquake has started, but no one has any idea what it could be related to or how to stop it. It's never happened in the village before. Even the girl was frightened. She felt a strange energy from this stone and regretted that she had decided to get it in the first place. Meanwhile, down in the depths, something is clearly happening to the statue. It has started to move as well as the ground. Small cracks started to appear on it, and then bigger pieces started to come late. Very curious about what this means and what's about to happen. But it seems like someone could use a swim to shore and get on land. Everyone clearly heard the statue crack and most wanted to run home. They don't even want to see it, because lately there have been too many terrible events. Meanwhile, the next day came. Luckily, nothing bad happened. This time, everyone woke up early and it seems the girl was going somewhere. She took a lot of stuff with her and promised she would try to figure it all out. The man asked if she was sure she wanted to go alone, since she could probably use helpers for sure. Erin thanked for the offer but said she wanted to go alone. She was sure others might get hurt and she didn't want to take on that responsibility. The girl wants to find all the answers and only after that, go back. The man promised that they would all pray for her safe journey. Meanwhile, it was evening. Some guy came into the forest, and from the looks of him, he had already managed to destroy someone. It turns out he's looking for monsters, and surprisingly, he's not afraid to go to this battle himself. At some point, he heard the distinct smell of food, and since he was very hungry, he couldn't ignore it and started looking for the source of the smell. For him, it is incomprehensible who in his right mind would cook food in the forest, which is swarming with monsters, because at the very least, it is unsafe and not very pleasant. This person was Erin. She was eating in the woods and a huge monster came in smelling the food. The girl didn't realize there were so many of them here that in just a second, the creature would smell it. Now she knows that monsters are very much attracted to the smell of food that people are used to eating. But fortunately, the girl was not confused and began to defend herself. She was prepared for such a situation and was not even scared much. The thing is, she's got a spirit stone with her. And as far as we know, monsters are supposed to retreat at the sight of it. The monster seems to want to destroy not only the food, but also the person who brought it into the forest area. He pounced on the girl as if she were the only one he'd managed to find in years in this dark and scary forest. The legend that the monster should retreat at the sight of the stone turned out to be false. This information was told to her by her grandfather, but it seems that he was a little wrong. In any case, she does not hold a grudge against him. After all, she decided to go on this journey herself. She had never had to fight a monster before. It was hard to put into words how much she was now afraid to make even one wrong move, when suddenly, the same guy who also smelled the food appears. As soon as he saw that the girl started to defend herself, he helped her, but it seems as if she was afraid of him even more than of the monster. Erin doesn't even know if she's happy to see him or not, because just now, she was under a lot of stress and it was unexpected to see someone else. Until he started talking, she saw him as just another enemy to defend herself against. Meanwhile, he warned that this was one of the most dangerous forests she could have chosen. There were more monsters than plants here. He advised to get out of here immediately. Otherwise, next time, he might not be able to come to the rescue in time. And instead of one monster, she would be attacked by hundreds of monsters. Not to stop at a conspicuous place, the boy led her to a cozy corner and decided to feed her. He made a fire and began to tell her a little about himself. At some point, he changed his mind about talking and decided to ask how she even ended up here. Erin explained that it didn't happen by accident. In order not to tell the truth, she had to invent a legend that she was going to the neighboring village to visit her uncle and decided to take a shortcut. The only thing he's wondering now is how her parents allowed it, and how she could go on such a trip late at night without friends or adults. Erin started to get indignant and said that she was no child. She was an adult who could decide for herself where and with whom she wanted to go. The girl suggested that maybe she and he were the same age. In response, the guy smiled and asked how he could help people now, because in response, he hears only indignation, and so far has not heard any words of gratitude. For some reason, the girl misunderstood him and thought he meant some money she had to give for his help. In that case, she found some coins in her possession, but it seems too few at least, and it seems so. She showed that it was all she had and all she could offer him, except that it was the very money she had taken with her on the road. If he took it, she would have nothing left even for food. In response, the guy only smiled and said that she had misunderstood him completely. It was enough to just thank her with words, or at least not to resent her. Meanwhile, the dark night came. Beautiful stars and moon appeared in the sky. One can admire it endlessly, but they have too many topics one wants to discuss during this time. Since Aaron realizes he's a good man and can protect her, there's no reason for her to go anywhere else. And he's having a good time with her, since he's gotten too lonely in a few months here. At some point, they made the decision that resting and falling asleep wasn't a good idea, especially in this place. And since they'll be up all night, it's a great opportunity to get to know each other better and talk about something interesting to forget about monsters and not think about something bad. It turns out that the girl made him a very tasty soup, and as soon as they had eaten, in gratitude, the guy decided to unexpectedly make her happy. He let her go to bed and told her to take care of her safety himself, but at some point, as soon as Aaron fell asleep, he sensed something strange. As usual, some spirits appeared in the forest. They started attacking both him and the girl, but so far she doesn't notice it. The guy has never encountered this before and knows what to do. He started destroying them one by one and decided that it was better not to tell the girl about it, because if she finds out, she will never want to and will not be able to sleep again. So many that at some point, he thought it would be impossible to deal with them, but as soon as he saw their horrible faces, decided that such creatures had no place in this world, he mercilessly destroyed each one of them, and didn't hesitate to do it to those who wanted to attack Aaron in the first place. He finally succeeded. He continued to observe the situation of the forest, and moved closer to protect the girl at any moment. He promised that her sleep would not be disturbed by any dream demons, and if they tried to do so, they would be very sorry. At some point, the girl started to get very nervous and started crying in her sleep. The guy couldn't help himself. He went up to her and tried to calm her down. He is very curious about what happened to her and why she is so much afraid of something. He realized that despite her cute looks, she must have gone through a lot and given up a lot for this life. For the rest of the time, until morning, he looked at the sky and at her. He thought he had done the right thing in letting her rest. He felt like a real man and made sure it had been the best decision. In the meantime, the next day came. The girl woke up in the morning and slept very well. She thanked him for giving her this opportunity, because now she had plenty of strength and energy. And that wasn't all. He escorted her to a safe place from where she looks calmly to move on. Aaron thanked him for all he had done for her and promised that as soon as she had the chance, she would be sure to thank him back. Lastly, she wondered where he lived, so that next time she could come and visit him and meet again. Unfortunately, he thinks that she should not even try to look for his house, because he lives very far away, and it is unlikely that their paths will cross again. By some miracle, the girl found out that he lived in the capital and was glad, because she was planning to visit there in the near future. He wondered what she wanted in the capital and whether she had any friends and relatives there. At this point, she decided to become him a strange question. Namely, had he ever seen the Emperor? The guy didn't understand how it was related to his question and asked why she was asking about it. Right after that, she asked me to forget everything she had just said and decided to say goodbye, because time was running out and she still hadn't moved from her seat. Aaron explained nothing and started to leave, and of course promised that she would try to find him and meet again, only in a safer and more comfortable environment. Afterward, he became very curious to know why she was so much interested in the Emperor. The girl heard the question and explained that she wanted to discuss something with him someday, but for now, she wasn't ready to say what it was. Meanwhile, she'd walked into some woods that were much nicer to be in, unlike the one she'd come from. At some point, she happens to be noticed by some people. They've been here for a few days and have never seen a person here before. One of them is sure he saw a girl. The other one starts saying it can't be. According to him, there are no villages nearby. So there have been no people here for the last few years, and there can't be any. Besides, if there really were people here, it would be a big group, but definitely not one girl. Meanwhile, Eileen is walking through these woods and realizes she's starting to see in some creatures people just can't see spirits. The exception to the rule are those few who have been blessed by the spirits themselves. Such people can see and hear them without any problems. It is said that if one enters this forest with a spirit stone, one will be able to see spirits very clearly, as if it were an ordinary creature. Of this she had also been told by that grandfather, the girl, that at least it had turned out to be true, and she would really see something interesting. According to the plot of the novel, this place must be somewhere close. At least it seems that way to her and even feels a bit like it. As soon as she started to approach that place, the spirit stone started to glow and shine even more, meaning that this place is very close to her. The girl started to look around and saw something incredible in front of her, a sight she had never seen in her entire life. Very interesting what it looks like and why she was so surprised. After all, what could be so amazing in an ordinary forest? It turns out this is the abode of the Spring Queen Baruna. Erin realized she definitely needed to stop here. This was the place she was looking for. Had to walk down a small mountain a bit, and it seemed to be worth it. It was really beautiful here. The girl even felt a special energy. After that, she immediately started screaming very loudly to waste no time and do it right now before anyone interfered. She said there was a very important conversation, and if she didn't show up now, a lot of people from her village would die. And as soon as she said those words, something incredible began to happen. A small drop of water appeared out of nowhere. It fell into this lake and began to summon the queen. There were strong waves in the lake, a noticeable change in the atmosphere, and a feeling that someone was about to actually appear. There was something in the air that looked like a pink flower about to open, and a miracle would happen. Immediately afterwards, a beautiful girl emerged from it, as if mesmerized and soothed by the mere sight of her. Spring Queen Baruna, a beautiful girl who can help save the village, but her appearance was too deceiving. She was a cute queen at first, but in just a few seconds she turned into some kind of scary creature. Erin was very frightened, because she expected it to be a calm and pleasant conversation. And in the end, the queen began to wrap some branches around her, so that the girl would not run away or change her mind about the conversation. The queen agreed to talk, but the girl seemed to immediately regret deciding to do so and coming to this place in the first place. A beautiful, sweet girl turned into some kind of villain who you don't want to trust, let alone ask for anything. Instead of talking calmly, the queen, on the contrary, became indignant and said that the girl had woken her up for nothing. She didn't like guests, and especially not to help anyone. The queen said that if a girl dared to speak her name, she must have a very good reason, or else she would be very sorry for disturbing her. Does the Queen of Spring really look like that and hate so much all those who try to disturb her and ask for help? She ordered to speak quickly. Otherwise, if this conversation took too long, she would get very angry and threw her from a great height. She has no desire to wait for anything, much less beg for words from a frightened girl. She doesn't even hide the fact that she hates Erin. Only it's unclear why and for how long. After a few minutes, the girl found the strength to say that she came from another world, and on this world, there was a whole book she had read. The queen slapped her and said she was getting too bored and hadn't heard anything interesting, and hinted that she might change her mind about listening to her. It's strange, but she really doesn't believe a word she says, and yet she seems to know this girl, and for some reason she refuses to help her on purpose. Erin replied that it was true after all, thanks to the story. She had learned about the queen and Mr. Andres. Besides, in such a situation, it made no sense for her to deceive her. At one point, the queen suddenly let go of her and went back to being as the girl had originally seen her. She wondered how Erin could see her, much less know her name. At some point, Erin started turning into some guy. She got ears and her voice changed. She said she was half elf and half human, which is why she can see the queen very well, unlike other people. The queen immediately changed her attitude towards her and began to talk about herself. She no longer behaves like a villain who is not happy with a guest. And also, she said that if the girl didn't know, it was forbidden to enter the place of the term, even to those who could see her. Aaron said that she knew about it, but unfortunately there was no other way to do it. She really needed this conversation, because the life of the whole village depended on it. It turns out that all this time, the girl knew she wasn't quite human and hid it from the whole village. At this point, the queen became very curious to know what the problem was and how she could help her. Immediately after that, without even waiting for an answer, the queen took and asked that he trust her and follow her. After they had come to some place, the girl asked why it was so important for her to meet the Winter King. Aaron was afraid to say anything, but at the same time she promised that the queen would find out soon and was very scared and didn't want to make the mistake of telling her secrets to strange creatures. Besides, just a few minutes ago the queen almost destroyed it and she sounded like she wanted to get rid of it. No wonder the elf is afraid to speak the truth until she is sure it is safe. For so far, the queen has given no reason to trust her to talk to her calmly on any subject. Since the girl realized that the elf would not leave until he talked to the emperor, she decided to warn that if he wanted to cooperate and ask for her help, he would have to try very hard. Because as soon as the emperor fulfilled someone's request, according to the rules, he would no longer need an assistant. So before she helps the elf, she wants to get something that will make her give up her seat without a problem. She even started to hint at what exactly she wanted. But the elf pretended not to understand anything. He even wanted to escape unnoticed, but unfortunately, there is a feeling that the queen will never let him do so. So the building suddenly turned into a trap, and to get out of here, he will have to fulfill her unusual wish anyway.